On behalf of the school board, I want to reiterate our strong support for our transgender students and staff in light of the draft model policy for Virginia schools released last Friday. We issued a statement supporting our transgender students on Monday, and we will continue to act in the best interest of our students and staff. This proposal does not reflect our values here at Arlington Public Schools and would change how transgender, non-binary, and gender-fluid students and staff are treated in our schools. These proposed policies would roll back crucial protections APS and other school divisions have recently put in place to ensure our LGBTQIA+ students and staff feel safe, valued, and welcome at school. APS will continue to adhere to our non-discrimination policy adopted in June 2017 and updated in 2019 to include transgender students and establish policy implementation procedures for schools to follow in supporting transgender students. We will abide by current federal and state law to ensure all students are treated with dignity and respect while having equal access to a quality education. To learn and grow, students must first feel safe, connected, and supported at school, free to express themselves. This is fundamental to education. I encourage our community to make your voices heard by participating in the 30-day public comment period for this draft, which starts on Monday, September 26th. You can visit townhall.virginia.gov, that's townhall, all one word, .virginia.gov, to view the open comment forums and provide your feedback when it opens on Monday. We will continue to engage with students, staff, and the community on this issue. This is a time to stand together and speak out.
Got any room up there for me, Charlie? Give us a hand, Charlie.
Major, what are you doing here?
Individuals with their personal expressions. I'd like to turn to our superintendent, Dr. Duran, for comment.
There is an old saying in politics, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And a particular invisible enemy, for at least 2 years, had the effect of not only closing the doors of public schools, but also had found in direct and proximate cause the sharpest decline in both math and literacy scores in history, which effect shall be felt for generations to come. Because the children who have been failed during a pandemic shall become the teachers of tomorrow, possessed with a patent defect of degraded academic proficiency that shall be felt for years to come. And to avert that adverse outcome, that inequity, something has to be done in education and done right now, because unless you happen to own a time-traveling DeLorean and happen to know Doc Brown, we can't turn back time, not even in evolving science. Hello, my name is Major Mike Webb, and I am not an educator, but may have a solution that can not only rather easily address this achievement gap now experienced by all students, but actually accrue benefits that will improve student performance across the board above the levels prior to the pandemic, and help to erase what has been a historically pervasive achievement gap for children of color and in disadvantaged situations. Do I have your attention? Perhaps you are interested, but have you made your decision to take action? At least one entrepreneur in California, Richard W. Fisher, a classroom teacher for 31 years, an author and publisher for over 20 years, has produced a program that can solve this serious dilemma we are facing and make it possible for other students to thrive in math. Just 4 books, available in English and Spanish. And as you might guess, it's available for a 60-day trial basis completely for free. And if you act now, with the special code, you may even qualify for a limited time discount of 10% with a code. Crisis is always an opportunity to sell something in needs-based selling. Create a need and sell a product. But I don't want to sell you a book. I don't want to sell you anything, but rather just to give you an idea completely for free, which you are perfectly free to accept or reject. In late September, the New York Post joined many other national publications to report that student test scores plunged in the U.S. as the COVID-19 pandemic erased decades of academic progress, with math scores recording their largest decrease ever and reading scores at a 30-year low. Alarming new data known as the nation's report card. But if you have been following the politics on education lately, Focus has essentially put this problem on the back burner, seeking to avoid a problem that requires action now, and rather focusing on provocative issues that appeal to certain political and ideological bases in a raging cultural war on what some want to see in books and schools and where some want to pee in public schools. But education, like the Army, where you have the opportunity to be all that you can be, is at least something, according to Chief Justice World Warren, perhaps the most important function of state and local government, or something for the front burner. And such an opportunity where the state has undertaken to provide it is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. And at least one Virginia native, born in Norfolk, Sam Proctor, my Uncle Sam, or at least that's what we used to call him, who would later become the first African American to serve as a member of the board at the Ford Motor Company, the former president of Virginia Union and former pastor of the historic Abyssinia Baptist Church in Harlem. Far more than opportunities to play in interscholastic sports competitions, or even to discuss various social concerns and topics in history, was the opportunity to receive a basic education, learning the fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic. If you can read, you can go and read your own history. If you can write your own history. If you can perform arithmetic, you can do your own math, which Chief Justice Warren had suggested were required in the performance of our most basic public responsibilities, including voting and even service in the armed services, and had described this as the very foundation of good citizenship. So let's take a time out for now from the critical race theory and transgender policies debates to focus on getting the knowledge to get to college so that you can be all that you can be. As my Uncle Bill's organization, the United Negro College Fund, used to say, a mind is a terrible thing to waste, and so is time. Some may recall a classic film starring Al Pacino portraying a retired Army colonel about obtaining an elite private education and at an elite boarding school. And some may recall that even though Charlie, portrayed by Chris O'Donnell, had arrived at the country club, enjoyed most of the benefits of the club, and thought that he was a part of the club, even still was not treated as a full member of the club. And when that comes to education, that actually does occur with far-reaching consequences, about which I may even cite one example from my own experience attending an elite Jesuit high school, and not much unlike Gonzaga High School, the elite Jesuit high school that Congressman Don Meyer Jr. had attended across the Potomac in D.C., within eyes view of the Capitol, where today he represents Virginia's 8th congressional district. At a Jesuit high school, you will probably not find elite private clubs like at Yale and Harvard, or even a regionally and economically stratified fraternity system like at one elite private college in the Shenandoah, Washington elite. But at least one division will become immediately apparent, especially if you happen to be a non-Catholic, and probably will find yourself essentially segregated from your classmates in instruction of religion. Because rather than doctrinal instruction classes for Catholics, you might find yourself in a class on secular ethics under a title like personal development, which is non-offensive, non-intrusive, not forcing religion on you, or what is often termed as not necessarily being tolerant, but rather is acting in comity, or not forcing different views on you that you might not possess. Don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue. And as one might expect at any high school, some students may become jocks and form a little jock clique. Some students might sign up to write for the school newspaper and form a little newspaper clique. Some might join the band and form a little band clique. And you are probably going to become very familiar with the realities of peer pressure and social cliques in high school, which for some makes the high school experience particularly difficult, because everyone may want to run with the cool kids and the in crowd, but not everyone will be able to do so. That would totally destroy the idea of an in crowd and an out crowd. And at least one French visitor to an inchoate democratic republic had rather famously observed that he had never met in America with anyone so poor as not to cast a glance of hope and envy upon the enjoyments of the rich, or who did not possess himself and his imagination in longing for those good things that fate still obstinately withheld from him. Face it, we never leave high school in life, and just about everyone wants in some way to keep up with the Joneses. And even back in the beginning of the 19th century, Alexis de Tocqueville had thought that this passion had become the sole passion of the entire nation, consuming everything and sweeping everything in its course, frustrating even Reverend Martin Luther King in the 1960s, who had come to observe that those with privilege seldom relinquish it willingly. And maybe that's why he decided to become a drum major for justice, because despite any feelings you may have about your personal entitlement, you're going to be in a world of hurt if you continue to just keep dreaming that everyone else is just going to give you something for nothing. It simply is what it is, as they say. And at least my dad used to say, maybe that's why there's a heaven. And even in the law, attorneys have what they describe as de facto, in Latin, literally, of the fact, discrimination, or the things that just are what they are. And at least the alcoholic's prayer asks the Lord to grant the peace to accept those things that you cannot change. And if you are continuing to try to change those things that you can't, you're probably going to experience a lot of frustration, which is why even the law doesn't worry about it. But at least attorneys also recognize that there is also what is described as de jure, or of the law discrimination. And very recently, Dr. Henry Louis Gates at Harvard University had noted that Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, a former president of Morehouse College in Atlanta and the spiritual mentor of Reverend King, as well as for myself, had observed that 11 a.m. on Sunday morning was the most segregated hour in America, which he had ascribed then to being a matter of law or de jure discrimination. But in modern society had transformed into what he had described not as a matter of law, but a matter of choice. And even Pew Research Center has found that at least for most older African Americans, there is an express preference to worship at historically black churches with their unique forms of lively and spiritual worship experiences, or black church, like the president has claimed he had attended in his youth. While increasingly amongst younger African Americans who still possess a deep and abiding faith have expressed a preference for affiliation in what are often described as more diverse worship experiences, or white church. But if you aren't going to accept the things that you cannot change and change the things that you can with strength, it seems that if you are focusing on the former, or having people have you focus on the former, they are simply just playing with your feelings, because there's not really a lot that even lawyers can do about that. But beyond these social preferences, which at least under free association liberties, everyone is entitled to have, one difference that a discerning student might observe, at least while attending an elite Jesuit high school, is that some freshmen will find on their class schedules a course in Introduction to Latin, where they will have the opportunity to perhaps learn a few select Latin phrases and words so that they can sound like educated persons when rubbing shoulders in high society, while others will find themselves matriculating in a class called Latin 1, where they will study Latin declensions of nouns, conjugations of verbs, maybe even read some classical works like Pliny's Letters, get a foundation in history, which is a distinction with quite a difference. And one benefit of that far more intensive instruction as a matter of policy or law, de jure on an ancient language, is that they will develop a far better understanding of many of the Romantic languages, like Spanish or English or French or Italian, that they will take later in their high school years. A unique advantage, but also a far better understanding of basic grammar, exploring forms like the infinitive, the imperative, transitive and intransitive forms, the perfect, the imperfect, the pluperfect, and the future perfect tenses. And one might reasonably expect that those students, as a matter of policy, will thereby accrue a far better command of the English language than a classmate who had only learned a few choice Latin phrases to toss out at dinner parties, faking it until they make it. And 4 years later, given one student in introductory Latin and one student who had taken Latin 1 and then was required to take Latin 2, which student would you reasonably expect to be receiving a National Merit Scholarship or an acceptance letter from an Ivy League college? Probably the one who had received more preparation in a college preparatory course of instruction. And empirically, we can say, therefore, the data speak for themselves. Now, in the Alcoholic's Prayer to assist those who are suffering from an addiction, a consuming impulse, seek a peace in acceptance of those things that cannot be changed, and the strength to change those things that can be changed. But also, and probably most importantly, or a priori, to use the Latin phrase, they seek to the discernment to enable them with the power to recognize and distinguish the difference between these two different circumstances with two different outcomes. If only not to waste the limited time that all have chasing pipe dreams and focusing on those things where their efforts will actually be more productive. And when two classes on the same subject have different titles, that power to discern should be rather easily facilitated, as long as you have the power to rip yourself from being easily distracted by other matters that we often find, especially in high school, but it becomes increasingly far more difficult in situations in which there are not bright labels to capture your attention, broadcasting a difference. But when politicians are trying to get elected, like on the SAT, have only limited amount of time before that election, for them, there is great evolutionary pressure for their benefit to simply tell you what you want to hear just to motivate you to get out the vote. And then they can win. But do you? And memory scientists have found that persons who appear to have a greater retention of memory, both short and long term, appear to possess an ability to process information far more efficiently, rather than gathering individual snippets of information to process one by one, but rather collecting information for upload to memory and recall in packages, which speeds up the processing of information almost exponentially. For example, to calculate the sum of 1 plus 1. Most persons don't even think about the solution for the equation. It has become almost a reflexive response to arrive at the solution. And whether it is racing to a time section on reading comprehension on a standardized test, or finding the solution for quadratic equations, believe it or not, we already have the technology to teach students exactly how to do that rather quickly, making you stronger, faster, and smarter. But at least before a pandemic, only certain lucky students have acquired this instruction. And maybe now it's time to use that as our boomerang to push us further than we would have been before it. And so regardless of who wins an election, especially after a pandemic, just about every student has found himself in an achievement gap. Don't you think it would be far better to give yourself a chance to be all that you can be? And maybe that stronger, faster, smarter, and more capable student will be able to graduate, go to a good school, and come up with the solutions for all of those other things that you feel that you want to have in entitlement. It's just a thought, and we can't turn back time. As we continue this discussion next time, in the next video, this briefing is unclassified.
Thank you, Mr. Po-Shen. I certainly want to echo your comments, but I specifically want to speak to our students and to our staff and let you know that I want to reassure you, as Mr. Po-Shen said, our policies are remain in effect, will remain in effect, and we will continue to make sure in APS that we do all that is necessary to protect our students and our staff. So students, if you are feeling unsafe, unwelcome in any way, please speak to a trusted adult at your school, your counselor, your principal, and let them know. Because we will, and I want to tell all of our APS community, all of our staff, our parents, we are going to continue to follow that and make sure our students are safe. And to staff, I've heard questions and concerns about what should I do, how do I respond? You continue to do what we've been doing in APS. You continue to stand up for our students. You continue to follow that policy, and you make sure that we are proud of what we've been for many years, a safe place for all of our students. We will not let this get in the way and distract us of continuing to stay focused on why we're all here. For students to learn, to become successful, and to create the future for yourself. That's what we're about, creating a future for our students. We are not going to let this get in the way of that. And again, I want to encourage everyone, as Mr. Goldstein said, to mindfulness comment certainly to the policy, but the model policy, that's the governor and the state know it is important to engage in that. But let us all remain focused and do all that we can in our schools and in our community to protect all of our students, but certainly our transgender, non-binary, and gender-fluid students. Tonight we're speaking specifically about that. Please, we all have a part in making APS, from parents to staff, community members. We can and we must continue to make this a safe place. And if anyone in our schools does not provide that safe space for our students, I personally assure you that we will take care of ensuring that that changes and that students feel safe and can learn in APS. Thank you.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.